But what we want to do is talk about the bind. You can, whoever wants to do it, you can do it. You can stay there or not. There I am. All right, let's see. If I stand right here, if you stand right there, are you in it? Oh, snap. All right. So when we get in a bind, you never have a bind unless you intend to have a bind. Don't bind unless you know you want to. So several things happen upon the bind. As soon as there's contact, it's a bind. If you remain there with intention to remain there, then you're feeling almost immediately. And you're feeling whether or not they're being more strong or weak in their position. Are they pushing or are they kind of like giving, right? So the first thing you should try to do is continue this cut in or slice in. And that's just by turning your long edge in and applying forward pressure right towards your target. And if you can get them, that's great. Probably not going to happen. So if they push you off to the side, the next thing to do is you turn to thrust in. And if they push you further, you leave the bind to either go back and cut into that opening, if it's open, or to cut all the way around to the other side. So all of those handworks that are from the bind can happen with dueling and can happen right here. So I can have this bind and I mend it on purpose and slice to the other side, try to gain dominance moving forward, right? I don't want to do that, so maybe I pull in and pull out or thrust. If I'm not thrusting into the other side, well, then I can leave the bind. That seems real foolish, right? That's where the reverse grip happens, where if they do thrust, I'm already ready. So what that's called is from the bind, you can umschlag or umwechsel, just slice the other side, continuing on your path to either turn, pull to cut around or away, or to double back into the same opening. That's that decision tree matrix where you have your little best practice spells that are good for you, your combat hard drive, your RAM, right? But you're never going to go wrong if it's I'm throwing a cut or I'm in a bind and it's slice, turn, or slice, hit, thrust, or attempt, slice, turn, or wind to thrust. And then if it keeps going, well, then you just to pull to see what can happen. Like if they, yeah, sure, that's fine. You have to make something happen. Normally that pulling is to cut around to the other side, to slice in, to perhaps turn. Depends on what they're doing. Most often what they're doing is, well, they're just trying, if they're parrying in desperation, a lot of it's going to be like demph and defense strokes. Now, if you're dueling and you're in a bind, well, they're not doing defense strokes, but what they are doing is probably trying to push and offset you and wrench with their blade and trying to shoot themselves to an overbind so they can then thrust or cut or do whatever their plan is. But you have to have your plan and you have to work your plan. When you run out of your plan, what do? Withdraw. Yeah, I was hoping you were going to be like, withdraw! But you didn't do it. Oh, damn. Abzug! Yeah, see, you know. So, battle drill 1 is you continue the cut. You just keep slicing it, right? If it works or it doesn't. So like if I push in and it gets it, oh, she's way over here. If it's this is already like to no advantage to me. So from a wild big parry, which they're going to do, you have a couple options. You already can kind of cross your hands and go underneath to get them, right? And you can just keep on playing that game if they're going to static parry. Or if it's really hard on their way over there, you collapse it into the hand and you get inside and you can snatch them up or pommel smash them and a bunch of other stuff. Yeah. Question? Comment? Concerns?
I'm very concerned. But
Doing
good.
Ba-da-ba.
So far following.
So, just trying to think of the things that I would want to get to you, because they're going to stop showing for a little bit.
I will be back. Don't worry.
That's what you say. And the universe is a crazy place.
I mean, I'm still going to be a part of the
All right. If you're still on the Patreon, you're still going to get all the stuff. All right. So, understanding that you're going to be required shortly to tell me who Meyer is, and so what? Yeah. It's your turn. Yeah, you can use yours, or... So, I don't know what else pontificating can buy, but here we go. So when you're in a bind, and you plan on being in a bind, the first thing you want to try to do is to continue the thing you want to do. And if I push you offline, now you try to turn, other way, other way, other way. You're trying to point. Yeah, you're trying to gain that advantage. So if I'm like, no, and I push you here, now you're open, right? So now I can snap in your danger. So you need to leave that bind or do something else, right? So that's where you'd pull to try to cut all the way around, or you'd pull to see what I would do. Because if you pull and I do this, you could already, they could have been a fake out, a misleading, right? If you're here and you, I done screwed up, right? You fooled me. But that's that decision tree. But if you can, that's always going to happen, right? If I am on my initial cut, my angreifen, my first initial stroke, and I'm just trying to throw it out there, like I'm saying. So if I throw that out there and you're there, boom. I'm not trying to slice. That's not a killer blow. If it works, it works, you know. But if I'm trying to throw that, if I'm trying to purposely, I'm gonna get them. Like I've fooled them. This is the second ganga, right? I've pulled out of range from my withdrawal, and now I'm like, it's time to get them, and I'm gonna hit them, right? That's a different mentality. The reason you don't see that a lot in sports HEMA is they always call halt, right? There are 3 types of abzug. You withdraw with no advantage to anybody, and that's at the same time. So because when you come back into the fight, no one has an advantage. That sucks, especially if you had a good engagement, right? So those 3 abzugs. I can do it after my plan, and I hit you. Ah, yes, sweet, and I abzug, clear the space, and I'm here, and I'm ready, and I go right back in because I've done controlled the fight. Ideally, that sets me up in a place of advantage, or strength, as some people like to call it. And then Meyer speaks in terms of advantage and disadvantage. So, withdrawing after my plan is spent, my sword bullets, right? Once I've expended my plan and there's nothing else for me to do, and you've blocked it all, and you've got my number, well, then you formulate a plan with my failed plan if I keep and linger, which is a reckless thing to do, a foolish, reckless mentality to take on, right? Meyer says don't do that. Instead, apply judiciousness. Don't linger. Instead, you can act like, nope, I'll withdraw, I'll do. If I withdraw before you, even if I hadn't scored a hit, if I'm set up and allowed to enter the fight back again, I can do it with advantage. But if you always call halt, you're never going to feel that feeling of the entire art of fencing, combat, dueling. So it's dumb. Don't train it at home. So I hit you, I withdraw first. Awesome, because now you have an advantage upon, leaving safely and getting back in with advantage. If you do it, it's this inverse. Even if I hit you, smack, we're talking about the withdrawal, not the encounter. Right? Not the Krieg up to the glorious freaking score. Boom, I hit you, that's awesome. But you leave before me, maybe you hit me, maybe it doesn't, but you've departed. That's an afterblow. It's included in Meyer, but not used in those terms. Just like this is the Vorschlag, the Angreifen, but it's not used that way. If you depart before me, even if I hit you, pow, and now you're ready, I'm like, oh crap. And now I have to contend with you. Even though, or I can withdraw further and reset the fight entirely, which is what a lot of people do. But that means that punishes you for fencing well and then trying to re-engage. It also means if they run away everyone can see it, which was very discouraged back in the day. Number one, they didn't have nearly enough space to just be always, running backwards away from their opponents. Number two, why would you want to display that as your art to your peers? My fantastic ability to run away from my opponents, even if I hit them. No, it's good, but withdraw, but reset. Right? Anyway, a lot of the things about fencing that's important is the mentality. So it's like, why were they doing what they were doing? Because there's a whole lot of context. All right, questions?
I'm following pretty good, I think.
Awesome. Shika?
Yeah.
Cool. All right, what is...
We'll see if I can translate this later to myself.
Yeah, that's always the goal.
enough.
That's always the goal. So that battle drill number one from a bind, regardless, we'll say it's from even an Oberhau or something, is continue the slice in, maybe it'll hit. If I instead give you too much pressure, that's what you want to do. You want to be able to do that, right? Whether it's to whatever portion of me, even if it's safety for effectual. Actually, it gives you more time because you can stretch and hit it. But then if I push you further, and that's right here, it's not all this. No, you've probably never experienced this unless they parried shallow and pushed you. Most often, they just always over parry. So it alleviates a whole bit of the art that I'm teaching you that you don't need, because most fencers are going to they're throwing those haymakers. But the idea is that was enough. That was enough.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you weren't wearing armor, that's enough.
Yeah.
That's all I need. Like right there to your throat, that's enough. So what are we playing at? Are we playing at being an armored tin can noble murdering peasants on the battlefield? Or are we doing journeyman fencers in the 16th century? You just have to make up your mind. You can do a little of both, but it's good to separate your peanut butter from your jelly sometimes, especially if you're trying to do the research for it. So whilst at home, regardless of how hard they parry, your brain is telling you, I'm cutting until I'm turning. I'm thinking I'm cutting until I'm turning, and then I'm pulling and cutting around, or I'm pulling to see if there's an opening I can go back into with my long or short edge, right? And the other rule that makes everything work, sword, body, sword, right? So when you're doing all of these things, because you can think good, bad, good, bad. Good, bad, good, bad. But what that's better than thinking that you can rotate through the spectrum of fencer types, thinking that, I'm going to be a type 1 fencer, I'm going to be a little bit overly aggressive, and then I'm going to shift into being judicious and make me be more measured. That's not how it works. It's more Aristotelian. The fencer types that we've been talking about that you have to flow through they're not these categories that are these fixed things, they're spectrums themselves. So I need to always be artful and balanced, measured fencer who's got a plan and doesn't take too many of the stupid risks. But in order to get stuff done, I need to be aggressive and seize the vor, but not so aggressive that I lose my bearing and become reckless and somewhat stupid. That's the same end of I can be reactive and linger in a place or position for a certain amount of time before it becomes somewhat stupid and reckless to do that. And the way that you traverse being the natural state of artful and measured, applying either violence or delay, right, is by applying judiciousness. Like that tells you the edge of how violent you can be before it's reckless and how long you can linger in this position, whether it's here, the position of ox, all of those oxes, right? If you see someone just fighting in 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, well, then you have found yourself lingering in those positions. We're not supposed to do that, right? Number one, you've set up a pattern. Number two, you're lingering in those positions. The position of ox or hanging and the position of ox or hanging. And you're just chop, 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 and you'll see it a lot. Promise. but they are lingering in that position, and therefore they can be taken advantage of because that is a reckless and foolish thing to do. And most often when they're doing that, it's just shoving the sword into their grill because they've set themselves into a pattern. And once you know that they're in a pattern, it's only a matter of time before they know it. You just have to it's all about giving them patterns to attack for the provocations or the invitations, and then you being able to see when they're doing the same thing. They're lingering. It might be an active lingering, like in a position, but like if I'm just here, I never move from up, and I'm just doing this. I'm just doing it. Well, I'm trying to have you come over here, but I'm just lingering over here, right? I can go from here, right? Well, I'm trying to get you to go over here, and that's fine. I'll probably get you if I can draw you this way. But the idea is at what point does that become stupid? Like, obviously, you're not going to attack that. I've got only so many steps. It's like a fathom, right? That's like 7 feet or something, right? That's like we've got a step, maybe a little more. If the person's lingering, you have the advantage. Because if they're lingering, you get to do a step, see what they'll do. You get way closer, and you get to do maybe another thing, and no matter what, they're reactive. So it's awesome. Like, they think that they're being smart so they can be reactive. Never, ever is it smart. At least that's what the sources say. Old freaking Johann and freaking Lichtenauer, and just about everybody else. I mean, what was it? Karate Kid. Strike first. Strike hard. Cobra Kai. I know they made a new one, which I haven't seen, so hopefully I'm not like, I'm a nerd.
I'll be honest.
So another thing I'm doing is one of my patrons, John, and some of his people, because he shares. He's like, I'd like to see how you teach. I'm like, well, all right, we're going to film something sometime. Well, here I am filming something sometime. So we're talking about that battle drill 1, where regardless of the pressure that you're getting, you're mentally always slicing, continue your cut. Like if they don't push you off well enough, if they don't parry correctly, they should be punished for that. So, but if you always train yourself to, upon contact, just always pull away, well, then you're never going to know if that was a good one or not. And they're always going to be able to fool you by putting their sword up. You've unfortunately become a clang fencer, Klopfechter. And this is like they're clang fencer. You're clang, clang, clang. You're not working your plan, at least not to completion, right? So if you're just clanging on at the swords, well, you're not really fencing. You're playing at a different game. And that was the complaint that eventually came out of like the factual, eventually like in the 17th and 18th century, was that it was like they're just like performers, clang fencers. They're not even fencing anymore. So I don't want to do that. I like the idea. That is our. That's the reenactors. Like there's a place for that. Like there's a beautiful, like a beautiful Ren Fair. There's a place for that. And it's like if they want to look and but like we could do just a little bit better. We got the sources. We got the time. We've got the ability. We've got the right weapons finally. We've got the right. I've got the right protection. My skull. So another thing that I might as well tell them, part of the calibration process. All right, let's grab those foamy swords.
Yeah, I was gonna say, maybe not indoors with these.
All right, we press pause on that or stop.